Quang Nam Province, 1969. A CIA-advised Vietnamese commando moves through a village at 2 in the morning, and the man he is looking for is asleep behind a thatched wall. What happens next takes less than 2 seconds and makes almost no sound, a mechanical clatter, a heavy thud, and silence. The people in the next room hear nothing they can identify as a gunshot. There is no muzzle flash through the wall, no supersonic crack traveling outward through the dark, no sound that the enemy can locate or onto. By the time anyone in that village understands what has happened, the operator is already in the tree line. The weapon that made that possible cost $20.94. It was built in a factory that normally made automotive headlights. It was stamped from sheet metal 1/16 of an inch thick, welded together in 2 halves, and assembled on a line that had never previously manufactured a firearm. The United States Army categorized it as disposable, no spare parts were stocked, because the expectation was that soldiers would simply discard it and draw a new one. The weapon was type classified on December 12, 1942, and the designers were told to build it fast and build it cheap. It served for roughly 50 years. The M3 submachine gun exists because the Thompson was too expensive to build and too heavy to carry, and because an army, facing a 10 million man mobilization in 1942, had done the arithmetic on both problems and found neither answer acceptable. The Thompson M1928A1 cost roughly $225 per unit at the start of the war. Arming 10% of 10 million soldiers at that price meant $225 million in submachine guns alone, before a single rifle or tank was paid for. The Ordnance Board needed something that a civilian factory could stamp out by the thousands, that would cost under $25 per copy, and that would function reliably enough to be useful in combat. They went to GM's Guide Lamp division in Anderson, Indiana. Guide Lamp made automotive headlights. Its workers were lamp fitters, welders, and press operators who had spent their careers shaping sheet metal into light housings, not weapons. Their machinery was built for high-volume stamping at civilian tolerances, not the precision machining that traditional gunmakers required. The Army's proposal was, in a sense, perfectly suited to the plant. Design a weapon that could be built on the same equipment that made Buick headlights, by workers who had never touched a firearm. The designer was George J. Hyde, born Georg Hyde in Opfingen, Germany in 1888, who had designed weapons for the Imperial German Army during the First World War, before emigrating to the United States in the mid-1920s. He produced the T-20 prototype in the fall of 1942, using the British Sten as his manufacturing benchmark. 5 prototypes went to Aberdeen Proving Grounds in November 1942. The Army approved the design in December, and the first production contract followed in January 1940. Concept to adoption in roughly 7 months, a genuine wartime record, though the popular claim that Hyde designed it in 30 days has no basis in the ordnance records. The Guide Lamp line delivered its first M3s in May 1940. By June 1944, the plant was producing 1,000 weapons per day. The final contract price per complete unit was $20.94, $18.36 to Guide Lamp for the receiver and assembly, plus $2.58 to the Buffalo Arms Company for the bolt. The figure that circulates everywhere, $15, is a rough wartime estimate that has been repeated so often it has displaced the actual contract number. The actual number is in the American Rifleman's documented account of the ordnance records. It is $20.94. For comparison, the simplified Thompson M1A1 cost roughly $45 per unit by early 1944. The M3 cost less than half that, and it was built by headlight workers. The M3A1, which appeared in December 1944 with several improvements over the original, worked by a mechanism that has no parallel in any other American service weapon. To cock the weapon, the operator opens the hinged dust cover on the right side of the receiver and inserts an index finger into a cylindrical recess, machined directly into the bolt face, because there is no charging handle. The M3 had a fragile crank-style lever that broke in cold weather and snagged on equipment. The M3A1 eliminated it entirely and drilled a hole. The 18-pound mainspring is light enough that one finger can pull the bolt rearward and release it. The Army made a design decision that the M3A1 needed fewer parts more than it needed a conventional cocking system, and the result is a weapon that looks, on close examination, like it is missing something. The dust cover that houses the ejection port is also the only safety the M3A1 has. The stud on the inside of the cover engages a recess in the bolt when closed, physically locking the bolt in either position and preventing any possibility of the weapon firing. Open the cover, and the weapon is live. Close it, and it cannot fire regardless of how much pressure is applied to the trigger. There is no thumb lever, no ambidextrous selector, no secondary mechanism. The safety is the lid. Folded for storage, the M3A1 measured 22 8/10 inches from muzzle to the end of the retracted wire stock, roughly the length of a man's arm from elbow to fingertip. The M16 it nominally coexisted with in Vietnam measured 39 inches. That 16-inch difference is the reason the grease gun did not retire when the M16 arrived. An M48 Patton tank has a crew of 4 and an interior roughly the volume of a small bathroom. When an M48 is in contact with infantry at close range, and the main gun cannot depress far enough to engage, a crewman's options reduce to whatever he can get through a hatch and use with some control. The M16, at 39 inches with its magazine seated, does not go through a tank hatch in any useful way. The M3A1 goes through folded at 22 inches, and when a sapper climbs onto the hull with a satchel charge, the difference between those two measurements is the difference between survival and the alternative. Every U.S. armored unit in Vietnam kept M3A1s inside their vehicles as crew weapons. The 1st Cavalry Division, the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, the 4th Infantry Division's Armor Battalions. ARVN armor units did the same. The weapon's role was not to engage at distance. Its role was the 10 feet between the hatch and the man trying to kill the crew, and at that range the 30-round magazine of naturally heavy 45 caliber bullets, firing at a controlled 450 rounds per minute, was exactly sufficient. The 450 round rate was deliberate. The Ordnance Board chose the heavy bolt and light rate springs specifically to slow the weapon down, because a man trigger tapping a full automatic weapon at 450 rounds per minute can hold individual shots with enough practice, while a man attempting the same at 800 rounds per minute emptying a magazine ceiling. A trained armored crewman with an M3A1 had the option of precise single shots or controlled bursts, without a semi-automatic selector on the weapon. The selectivity came from the trigger finger and from the slow mechanics of the bolt cycling 4 times per second. During the 1972 Easter Offensive, ARVN M48 crews defending Contour and NLC fired their M3A1s at NVA infantry who came within the main gun's dead zone. In 30 meters of urban rubble with enemy soldiers at the hull, they reached for the 22-inch weapon that had been in the vehicle since it was issued. The 45 ACP is naturally subsonic. John Browning designed it in 1904 for mass and stopping power rather than velocity, and a standard 230-grain military ball round leaves the M3A1's barrel at roughly 920 feet per second, well below the 1,125 feet per second, at which bullets produce a supersonic crack. No special ammunition is required. Load standard military ball, fit a suppressor, and what the enemy hears is the mechanical noise of the bolt cycling. A sound that travels perhaps 15 meters at most, does not echo, and that cannot be identified as a gunshot by someone who does not already know the weapon. The suppressor that Bell Laboratories designed for the OS is worth knowing in its specifics. The modified barrel was drilled with 40 H6mm ports along its length, venting propellant gases into a 14.5-inch outer housing, tightly packed with coiled stainless steel wire mesh. The gases entered the mesh hot and fast, were slowed and cooled as they worked through the wire coils, and emerged stripped of most of their acoustic energy before they could reach the muzzle. The system was not silent. A 1968 Army evaluation confirmed the suppressed M3 remained detectable at close range, but it reduced the weapons report to something that did not carry, did not echo, and did not locate the shooter. The OS procured approximately 1,000 of these suppressed barrels, and the system followed the weapon from World War II into the hands of the people who needed it most. What that specificity meant in the field was this. A designer who had emigrated from Germany and built the weapon in a headlight factory had, without intending it, given covert operators a tool that the Cold War would spend decades trying to replicate. The 9mm MP5 that eventually superseded the M3 in special operations inventories required dedicated subsonic ammunition to match what the 45 ACP did with standard ball. Delta Force reportedly kept suppressed M3A1s in inventory even after adopting the MP5, specifically because the grease guns suppressed better with cheaper ammunition. In the language of MACV-SOG, the suppressed M3A1 was the RON weapon, the Remain Overnight Gun. When a 6-man recon team established its overnight defensive position deep in denied territory in Laos or Cambodia, one man carried the suppressed grease gun specifically for this. If a North Vietnamese sentry, a wandering civilian, or a tracker dog stumbled into the perimeter in the dark. The threat had to be eliminated without producing the sound that would bring the regiment hunting them to their position. Sergeant First Class Jerry Shriver understood this weapon in personal terms. Shriver was one of the most decorated and feared operators in SOG's history, a man who ran over 40 missions into denied areas, and who earned multiple silver stars before disappearing in Cambodia in April 9. He carried suppressed M3A1s alongside sawed-off shotguns and Thompson M1A1s, consistently preferring the heavy .45 caliber round over the .5. 56 mm in close terrain where shots were measured in meters, not yards. Shriver once explained his weapons selection to a questioning officer in terms that required no further elaboration. If I need more than these, I got troubles anyhow. In triple canopy jungle where a 6-man team might be tracking or tracked by several hundred Envia regulars, the ability to remove a threat without announcing the team's position was worth more than any rate of fire. The suppressed M3A1 offered what nothing else in the SOG arsenal did at that range and that weight. The Phoenix program's PRU advisors used the suppressed M3A1 for raids against Viet Cong political cadres people who lived inside the civilian population of Vietnamese villages and could not be reached by any conventional military operation. The provincial reconnaissance units moved at night, plain clothes, against specific individuals whose names appeared on targeting lists compiled from informant networks. The weapon they carried had to accomplish two things simultaneously: kill definitively at the range where indoor work happened, and make a sound that did not carry beyond the walls of the structure. MACV-SOG operator Jim Bolin, who carried a suppressed M3A1 as his standard remain overnight weapon on cross-border missions, described the practical advantage in terms that applied equally to the Phoenix raids. It was a .45 that didn't give us away. The suppressed .45 round struck with enough force that a second shot was rarely required, and the sound it produced did not travel far enough to alert the guards outside or the neighbors next door. The 1968 Army evaluation of the suppressed M3 confirmed the weapon was quiet, but still detectable at close ranges, meaning it was not silent, but it was quiet enough. In a Vietnamese village at 2 in the morning, quiet enough was the difference between an operation that ended cleanly, one that became a firefight. What is confirmed is that PRUs carried M3A1s, and that SEAL advisors used suppressed weapons on these missions. A specific Vietnamese nickname for the grease gun, the silent killer phrase that appears in popular accounts, has no primary source and belongs to the same category as most wartime folklore about covert operations. The weapon did not need a nickname. The cadres who encountered it were not generally available afterward to coin one. In February 1968, a Marine combat photographer named R.J. Del Vecchio recovered a World War II-era M3A1, serial number 750213, from a pile of captured Viet Cong weapons in Hue City. The weapon had been issued to an ARVN unit, captured by the ENVA, and recaptured by the Marines. Del Vecchio carried it into combat with the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. When his element was ambushed, he used it to suppress enemy fire, and the Marines around him, fighting with early-issue M16s prone to fouling, were impressed enough that they assigned the photographer to guard the rear perimeter. Del Vecchio eventually passed the weapon to another combat photographer, Dennis Fisher, who carried it on Operation No Name 2 in April 1968, attached to Delta Company 1st Battalion, 27th Marines. In the middle of a heavy firefight, Fisher opened fire across a canal with the M3A1, and the weapon's sound, a deep, mechanical, unhurried cadence entirely unlike the sharp crack of any standard-issue firearm on either side, halted both American and NVA fire for several seconds, while every man in the engagement tried to determine who was shooting what. A weapon from a headlight factory, designed in 1942 to be thrown away, had just stopped a firefight in 1968 purely by sounding different from everything else on the battlefield. That grease gun, serial number 750213, and its chain of carriers, is widely considered the inspiration for the character Crazy Earl in Gustav Hasford's novel The Short Timers, which Stanley Kubrick adapted into Full Metal Jacket. VC armorers in underground workshops sawed M3A1 barrels short and stripped the wire stocks, producing a weapon compact enough to conceal under civilian clothing or carry through the Cu Chi tunnels. Sapper units used cut-down grease guns to clear American bunkers in close assaults, relying on the same slow cyclic rate and the same heavy bullet that made the weapon controllable in a tank turret. They also used the Chinese copy. In 1947, the Shenyang Arsenal in Mukden produced an unlicensed clone of the M3A1 chambered in .45 ACP, designated the Type 36. 10,000 were built before the factory fell to communist forces. The weapon moved through Chinese military channels and eventually down the Ho Chi Minh Trail into the hands of NVA and VC units, meaning that at certain points in the Vietnam War, American soldiers were being fired upon by stamped steel copies of their own headlight factory weapon, a weapon that had been sent to arm the nationalists against the communists, repurposed by the communists against the Americans. Argentina's map factory built its own 9mm copy, the PAM, and Argentine commandos carried it in the 1982 Falklands War. British paratroopers captured PAM-2s on the islands. A weapon designed in Anderson, Indiana, fought in a war between Britain and Argentina 40 years after it was built to be disposable. The United States Army type classified the M3 on December 12, 1942. The last confirmed combat use was by armored crews in Operation Desert Storm in 1990. The weapon left frontline inventory sometime in the early to mid-1990s, roughly 50 years after it was designed to survive one war. At a recent Rock Island auction, a transferable guide lamp M3 exceeded its estimate to sell for $40,950, $20.94. Built in a headlight factory, designed to be thrown away. The throwaway is now worth $41,000, and the men who carried it in Vietnam have still not finished being written about.